Dave's bullet head hopper. Step 1.
For this, we're going to use a 3x long number 6 hook. You want something with a bit of a shank length to it and some tan monocord thread.
Step 2.
Now for the first part here, we're going to take a chunk of red neck hackle and peel off a fair-sized portion, about an inch of fibers off the quill. Make sure the tips are lined up fairly evenly. Tie that in a little bit longer than the distance of the hook gap, extending over the back of the fly there. Lay it nice and neatly on top of the hook.
Step 3.
Now we're going to take a furnace saddle hackle and trim off the tip.
I notice that you always run your hand down the hackles, and I'm wondering what the reason for that is.
That just helps keep the fibers out of the way when you trim the tip. It gives you a point to trim away at.
Step 4.
Next, we're going to tie in some poly yarn. This is a pale yellow. And again, pale yellow is probably the most appropriate color for a grasshopper body, depending on the hopper you're trying to imitate. You can see that keeps the body nice and neat. And the reason we use poly is because it's quite buoyant and water repellent. I would have to say it'd be the best material for this situation. Wrap down about 3/4 of the way down the fly.
Step 5.
Now take and palmer that hackle through the whole body. Really just segments the fly and helps a little bit with flotation. You don't want to get too far into those soft fibers in the hackle though, otherwise they'll start to absorb water and defeat the purpose of this whole thing. Now take and trim the top of the hackle, leaving still 1/8 of an inch exposed. And on the bottom you want to leave up to about the hook gap in length. Somewhere in around there. Get rid of all those odds and ends.
So these are actually used to hold the bug off the water.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons. It also adds, like I say, for segmentation. If you look at a grasshopper, it's slightly ribbed. You can see like the hackle's longer at the back, but it's not really. It's just the darker hackle showing up.
Step 6.
We're going to use a piece of turkey quill for the wing here, and this is probably the best material for this situation. And clip off a piece about the distance of the hook gap.
Step 7.
Now we're going to take and coat this with a flex cement. Dave's flex cement seems to work the best. Dries nice and rubbery and won't crack on you. Now we've got a piece that we prepared earlier, and we're going to take and cut the tip ends to a bit of a round shape.
Why the tip ends?
Because we want to tie the butt ends in there a little bit stiffer and will hold their shape a little better. And kind of lay that over the hook so it's a little bit rounded. We don't want to clump it together. We want it to lay right around the hook. That way the fibers won't split apart. You can see here the flex cement keeps it from all the fibers from splitting. Trim off those butt ends.
Step 8.
Now what we're going to do is prepare a couple legs. Now we've got a natural grizzly neck hackle here. You want something with a fairly stiff stem. It'd also be nice to use a dyed yellow or dyed green leg. We're just using what we have available. When you trim this, you want to trim it with the fibers a little bit longer towards the butt end of the feather, which is where you pull it off the skin. And that way it'll give us a bit of a depth to the lower portion of our leg. You want to trim 2 of these feathers, somewhat identical, and take and tie a knot in them. It's a bit finicky, but They're cheap, and with a bit of practice, you should be able to get it down pat. It's also not a bad idea to use rubber legs in the sea. They're knotted rubber legs. You might want to experiment with both. Just neaten that up a bit and snip the tip off. Now the knot's going to be close to the tip of the leg. That's how it's going to lie in on the fly. To take that, kind of twist and turn it and lie it in on the side of the fly. Take and lie on the other side. You can see you want the knots to end somewhere near the end of the wing. Make sure those are tied securely in there.
Step 9.
Here we're putting a little bit of glue just to make sure that the legs aren't going to slide out.
Step 10.
Now we're going to choose some deer hair. Something with nice tips on it, something that isn't broken, and comb that deer hair out. Get rid of all that underfur. Gonna even that up here in the hair stacker. Take it out. Get rid of all those loose hairs which are uneven. Now we're gonna use this piece for the bullet head and part of the collar of the fly. So that's why we want to measure it to about the length of the body. And trim that off. The portion that's extending out past the eye is the length of the body. This is just the part we're going to tie down. Try and get it wrapped right around the whole hook and a few loose loops before we tie it down. And it's going to be quite bulky because we use quite a bit of deer hair here. You can see there, it's a bit of a mess. We can trim that away with our scissors. Be careful not to cut the legs off or any of those hairs we just tied in that are sticking out over the eye. Get right butted up against the eye of the hook. See, those hairs aren't quite as even as they originally were when we tied them in. They still should turn out fine though. Get that tied in tight.
Looks like it takes a little bit of working just to get the bullet head to lay back for you.
Exactly. We're going to put a few more there, and it's not quite close enough to the eye of the hook yet.
You can feel that as you're trying to push the hairs back?
Exactly. As you push your fingers over there, it should be right up, kind of pushing out into the eye. That should be pretty close. There we go. Pull those hairs back. Make sure they're extended all the way around the fly.
Step 11.
Now once we've got that tied down, we can whip finish. Definitely wouldn't be a bad idea to put some glue on that thread. And this is also an option. You might want to trim away those hairs on the bottom. This just allows the fly to ride right water level, because a grasshopper is quite heavy. It doesn't really stand on top of the water, but more or less sits right in the surface film.